Hello again. It's I've become aware that maybe I should say something that's might be meaningful to some of you that have kind of tried to make an effort to follow along and keep up with some of my thoughts. That I found myself reaching back maybe into something that I've said in a previous podcast, and I haven't done very many yet, but I would imagine that would probably be the case going forward as well. So I would just suggest that if you're interested at all in any of this stuff that I have to say, and that you might consider going back and at least doing a sequential watch if you can't go clear back, because I intend on doing quite these podcasts came over me over a lot of years, and I'm not going to pound them all out in a week. So if you intend to kind of stick with me, it would be a good idea to at least go back and watch the previous 3 or 4 if you can, if you can budget that much time, so that if I happen to reference something that came up in a podcast last time or the time before that, it won't leave you completely lost. I'm trying to get away from having to restate everything, but it's a little difficult in that, especially in this early going, there's some foundational things that kind of may have made me what I am, given me the understanding and a platform to my life, I think, a foundation into some of this, and it'll be referenced probably throughout, but at the same time, I don't want to have to repeat, or I don't want to repeat any more than I have to maybe make a point. Sometimes repetition is a good thing. It can drive a point home that maybe otherwise wouldn't be driven home as well as it could be. So I don't mean to get too serious about all that, but I think as I've thought a little bit about what I might say today, my thoughts have kind of tied back to a statement or two that I read last time. So I'm going to read another line, the same line actually, again from the Walden book that I've referenced, about the intellect. It says, the intellect is a cleaver. It discerns and rifts its way into the secret of things. Secrets are kind of intriguing to me. I've often wondered why there would even be a secret, and I'm gaining more of an appreciation for that all the time, as to why they exist, why everything isn't just readily understandable at first glance. But that doesn't seem to be the way it is, at least not for me, and I don't think it is for many people either. And then I'm going to read this line again and maybe tie into it. If you stand right fronting and face to face to a fact, you will see the sun glimmer on both its surfaces as if it were a scimitar, and feel its sweet edge dividing you through the heart and marrow. Let me illustrate that, because we talked about digging like animals do with their snout and forepaws with our minds to find these gold nuggets that I mentioned last time. And I came upon a really good nugget. And it had the effect on me, just like this reading that I just barely finished. You will feel its sweet edge dividing you through the heart and marrow. And I have had such an experience. I've reflected on it quite often, and it's been a long time ago. like I've said, I'm 75 now. I'm not going to keep harping on that, but just to give you a reference. So this happened to me when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. That's 60 years ago. And I've never forgotten it. It's something, it could be classified, in fact, it probably is to many people, as a secret. And my mind was made aware of it in a kind of a strange way. Let me set the framework. My dad had asked me to, well, first of all, we ran a dairy farm about 2 miles, mile and a half away from, on up the road from where our home farm was. And we leased some property and took our dairy herd there for a good portion of the year. And because there was pasture and feed and water and everything seemed to work better. My dad had made me aware that there was something I needed to be aware of one night. And I was quite often put in charge of milking the cows there in this new barn. And on this place, it wasn't a new barn, it was new to us, but it was on this farm that we leased. And one night when I went up there to milk, he told me that he was aware that there was a cow that was about to have her calf. And that when I milked that night, if I would just kind of be aware of the herd as I brought them in and check on her and make sure everything was going to be okay and kind of update him. And so I milked the cows like normal, but when I brought them in, I could see that cow was missing. She wasn't with the rest of the herd. And cows have to kind of be taken care of in a timely manner. So I didn't stop right there and go looking for the cow, because I had a bunch of others that were ready to be milked, and they need to be milked when they're ready to be milked. If you haven't been brought up on a dairy farm, then you won't understand that maybe as well, but there's a time for everything. And when it's time to milk, it's time to milk. She wasn't there with the other cows. So I milked them and turned the last one out of the barn, and they went down into the pasture, and I went on a search for this cow. And the pastures ran across what we called the Ovid Creek. It bordered it pretty much all the way down, or either the Ovid Creek or tributaries to it. And I couldn't see the cow. I wasn't sure where that cow was, and I just kept thinking that she maybe has crossed the creek and gone over to the other side on other properties that we don't even work with. I had hoped not. So I went trying to find her, and she wasn't readily visible anywhere, like sometimes they are. And so I started into, there's one place there where there's, it's more than just a patch of willows. It's like a thicket of willows. And it was kind of triangular in shape. And there were places where the cows would go under there in the summertime, and because if the flies were after them, they'd go under there and they'd rub, the willows and the twigs and whatever that they crossed under would get the flies off their backs. And anyway, so there were a few trails, not too many, but a few, and that's where I started my search. Well, as I was walking out, something I failed to mention is, as I was walking out, I could hear some thunder off in the distance, and usually the storms would come in from the west, sometimes the southwest. and I didn't pay too much attention to it. But about the time I started into this thicket, there were some raindrops starting to come from some of those clouds that were moving in. And it wasn't too long until there was quite a bit of rain, and it made those willows just saturated with water, so that when I was walking in them, sometimes I'd have to get right down on my stomach and wiggle through different passages to get where I wanted to go. And that part of the story can be told by just making it abbreviated and saying that I got very wet. In fact, there wasn't a dry stitch on me as I looked around and to try to find this cow. Well, finally, after all of that, I looked through a little opening in the willows, and I didn't hear her, but I could see her. At least a cow. I couldn't really identify which cow it was at that point, but it was the same color and same markings, and I pretty much thought it was that cow. It just made sense that it would be. And so I started making my way toward that cow, and as I got a little closer, I could see that she had just barely had the calf. It probably hadn't been on the ground for any more than 5 minutes. It was that new. And the cow had stood and was making an attempt to lick the calf, and she had kind of licked the membrane back off of its nose. And unless you'd been around a calf that's newly born, you wouldn't understand this next part that I had to kind of get through. But at that point, the storm had moved a little further, had moved closer to the farm where I was working, and the thunder off in the distance was getting more regular, and I just felt like inside, I felt like something needed to be done. I didn't think I could leave that cow and calf out there. I don't know, maybe if I was older and had more experience, I would have just left them there till morning or went and got my father or something, but I didn't. I went over into the cow, and a cow with a newborn calf is a little hesitant to let you very close. So I had to kind of ease my way into that whole scenario, and as I did, the cow got a little more, permissive in letting me get closer to the calf. And I decided I had to pick that calf up. Now, I was maybe 15, but honest to Pete, I wasn't a big husky kid. I was stout, and I was tall and strong, I think. But I decided that I'd have to get that calf into the barn somehow. Well, the calf couldn't walk. The only way I had to get it into the barn was to carry it. And so I tried to pick the calf up. Well, the calf was so darn slippery from just having been born. Again, if you haven't been around a newborn calf, you wouldn't understand, but there was just slippery all over the calf still from the process. And I got the calf, and I tugged and pulled a little bit and got it through an opening, and finally got it over to a trail where I thought I could actually reach down and reach around it and get it up in my arms. And so I did that. And the calf was pretty cooperative, and the cow was better than I thought she might be. One thing I knew I wouldn't have to do is drive the cow, because if the calf was in my arms, she'd be right behind me, and hopefully she wouldn't get a mean streak in her and take after me. But but I got the calf in my arms. And I would guess the distance back to the barn to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, at least a quarter of a mile, about a quarter of a mile maybe, give or take. And the calf was not a little calf. It had some weight to it. But I was able to pick it up. And I started on the path, the path out of the willows and onto the pasture land where it was a little more open, and the cow was following me. And I carried the calf, and every now and then I just have to stop and put the calf down and just regroup and get ready to go again. And all this time, these thunderclouds were moving in on us. And it was getting closer because, we learned that once you hear a lightning strike, they always told us, if you can count a 1001, that was a mile off. And so you can get an idea how close the storm is by counting the lightning or listening to the thunder and then knowing how far off the lightning actually struck to make that clap of thunder. Well, I just knew I had to do it. And so I kept going, and as I got closer to the barn, I was just give out. I had exhausted myself, and I wasn't sure I was going to make it. And I can remember one little place there where when I got closer, maybe 75 yards off, I had to cross a little culvert, and there was a little water running under it, a place where we used to get watercress and things sometimes of the year. And I remember going across there and passing a big bull pen, and that we had to keep the bull in, the herd bull. And I looked up to where the barn was, and I thought, I can do it. I can do it. And my chest was just heaving with trying to get air. I was wondering if I was going to be able to finish it and without setting the calf down. But the thunder about that time had a clap that seemed like it was right next to me. It just, the best way for me to describe it is that I could feel I've heard it said that if the thunderstorm is too close and lightning is around in the area, that you'll feel it within your arms, and you'll start to sense that electric charged air type feeling. I'd never experienced it too much, but that's what I was told, and I was starting to feel something that was weird. And when I heard that clap of thunder that was so close, I thought, whew, I gotta go, and I gotta go fast. And I remember at that point I slipped the calf up around my neck. Again, that calf was so slimy. Oh, I still remember the feeling, and I grabbed the calf, one hind feet under one arm and front feet under the other, and I just took off toward the back door of the barn, and determined that I wasn't going to stop this time and rest. And when I got to the back door of the barn, it wasn't open, but there's a latch, and I had to reach up with one hand and pull the latch, and I remember kicking that. It was a barn door that had a fairly large doors, and they were double, so that each one would swing out in a different direction, and then there was about I want to say at least a foot rise up into the barn that the cows had to come in when we brought them in to get milked. And anyway, I pulled the latch with one hand and tried to keep the calf on my shoulders, and again I was just so give out. And I went inside, and the cow was still following, so I just kept going. I went up toward the front of the barn, and I slipped the little latch on a pin and that we had up there that had some straw and stuff in it that I thought would be a good place to to have him come. And anyway, the cow followed me, and I took the calf in there, and I remember just almost, I didn't lay the calf down, I didn't throw it down, but I just had to kind of toss it into a corner there, and then I just fell on my back off to the far side of the pen, and my lungs were going in and out and sucking for every breath that I could find. It's one of the things I remember most about it is just trying to breathe. I don't know what it was, but I taxed myself some way so that my breathing was really difficult. And I laid there and I breathed, and finally the breathing started to slow down a little bit. I guess you'd call that catching your breath. And I just couldn't believe what I had just done. And because it was a little frightening to me with all the thunder and lightning going on, and kind of a different experience anyway, as you can imagine. So I laid there on that straw, and I watched. Finally, when I caught my breath, I just kept laying there. For some reason, I didn't have an urge to stand right up. None of them were going anywhere. The cow was starting to lick the calf again, and everything seemed to be fine. So I was relieved in that sense. They were out of the rain. I had done what I felt like my dad would have wanted me to do in that situation, even though it took me to the limits. And I watched that cow lick her calf. And pretty soon my thoughts, instead of thinking so much about how I was going to catch my next breath, kind of turned toward the cow and the calf. And the cow was licking the calf, and the calf was kind of tossing its head in response to the licks. And eventually, as I laid there, the calf had been nudged enough by its mother that it started to make an effort to get up. And it tried and fell down, and it tried again and flopped over the other way with its hind legs, and anyway, it finally stood up. It was real wobbly. And I guess I've seen videos of others, and I've watched other animals that have been like that. Very wobbly and a little disoriented, as you can imagine, having had the experience that the calf had just gone through. Then I noticed that the calf somehow had the ability to turn itself around and follow its nose to the correct end of the cow, because it needed that colostrum milk that the mother had. Having been raised on that farm, we knew about that kind of milk and how important it was to get it into the calf as soon as possible. And it was all a natural thing to the calf, and the cow, I guess, too. But that calf got it back to the right side to the right end of the cow, which is kind of a miracle when you think about it. 50-50 chance, I guess. Anyway, got back to the right end of the cow, and I noticed as I watched that it had this instinct to turn its nose up. It's like it was reaching for something high, and not down or to the side, but it was reaching up. Well, all of you know how cows are made. The teats on the cow point down, and the calf, in order to be able to catch hold, has to tip its nose up, and then with the help of its tongue or whatever, a little encouraging move from its mother, kind of a low muffled sound when they have those new calves, that calf knew where to go. And at this point in time, I was just taking all this in and wondering, oh, wow, isn't life a great thing? Isn't it truly a miracle? And at that point, what I just read here out of the book about coming front and face to face to a fact and letting it the sun glimmer on both its surfaces like a scimitar and divide you through the heart and marrow. That was beginning to take place. And I say beginning because I laid there and watched that whole process, and I was inspired. I thought, what a creation I have just observed. What a great plan there is for that cow and that calf. And I watched, I think, I don't know how long it would have been. It seemed like quite a while. And yet, in one way, not very long at all. But I marveled at what I had observed, and I think some of it had to do with the fact that I felt like I was a part of it somehow because of what I'd gone through with that calf over my shoulders, and my tiredness and all that. And pretty soon the calf had a little, should we say, a bite to eat, and the cow seemed content, and I went over to the pen and latched the door closed and just left them there. And I walked down to the end of the aisle where we milked the cows, and those back doors, I closed those back doors on the back of the barn. These big folding doors, they were the kind of doors that had a top and a bottom. So you could close two big white doors on the bottom and leave the top ones open, and that's what I did. And just, I guess, to rest more than anything, I leaned over that top door and looked out on the pasture. And there was the most beautiful sunlit rainbow that I think I'd ever seen. And it was the whole rainbow. I could see it up and down. Came up, it was fairly, it wasn't a long one like you see sometimes, but it came up in the willows and kind of went down over a little bit further in the pasture and, and into the willows, but it was a beautiful rainbow. And it was at that time that something happened to me. And like Thoreau says, we seek only reality. And when I was looking over that barn door and I saw that rainbow, I had a feeling come over me that I've never forgotten for 60 years. I've reflected back on the experience. And the feeling was that, holy cow, there is a God. I had just experienced God's creations and been intimately involved in a process that I couldn't even begin to understand. And still can't to this day. But I was involved in it, and it drew me into the experience in such a way that I had that feeling come over. Let me explain the feeling just a little bit, because I've had other kinds of feelings. They're not that common, but and not quite like this. But my skin gets a little. I don't know if you've ever had it, like a balloon pulled over or rubbed on your hair and then put on by your arm, and the hairs kind of lift and whatever. It was that kind of an experience that I had, but it was combined with something else that I haven't experienced very much since. But it was combined with something else, and that's I felt kind of a warmth, and it wasn't like a warmth that came from the outside in. It's like it started in your backbone or somewhere there in your bowels and in the very core of you. And it just started out as a warmth, and it got warmer and warmer. And I won't say it got hot, but it was a radiating kind of warmth feeling. And between those two things and everything I'd experienced, I knew I had experienced the handiwork of God. And from that day to this, now adding lots of other experiences, that reality that be it life or death, we seek only reality. That reality that there is a God sunk into my soul in a way that was permanent. I can't deny that there is a God, and I couldn't from that minute on. And so I thought I'd just tell that story, because to me that was one of those gold nuggets that we would go searching for, even though in that case it may have been a result of some of the other things that I've wondered about and admired in creation and nature. But in that case, I felt like God gave me an inside track, some inside understanding, and seared this truth, this reality that God exists. And I felt like I knew that intuitively based upon the experience that I was given. I guess as a grace, as a gift, because of what my involvement was in that whole process, maybe. But well, I've used up all my time just telling one story, but I hope that you'll come to understand that same reality, and you'll go through a process, if you can, go through a process, or seek out, feel, understand that process if you haven't already felt it. But there is a God, and He's in control, and things aren't always cushy, but things are real. And sometimes there's some negative that comes in. That lightning and thunder scared the life out of me while I was doing all this. But it was all good. It's all part of the experience. And I've thanked the Lord, thanked God for that experience, in which He helped me to realize that, yes, God is real. So there you have it. Kind of a little insight into just what took up maybe an hour, a little more of my time when I was a kid on the farm growing up, but which has stayed with me for 60 years and does to this day, and has made me who I am. And I'm so grateful for that experience. Talk to you later. Hope that this didn't make you sick with the detail or whatever, but it was choice.